Hey everyone. Yeah, we have the slides. That's nice. Thanks. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been to a kind of a developers conference, something that's not like absolutely crypto-centric. So a few words of myself. I'm actually a developer. Like I've been a developer pretty much like all my life. I've been in competitive programming. Then I started building software. And in 2017, I went full-time crypto as a CTO of a company. And yeah, 2020, the whole DeFi explosion happened. And I would say that I was like at the right place at the right time. But you know, there was like this story before that that's kind of important. So this, gave me, this whole journey gave me the opportunity to learn how crypto works and how to benefit out of it as a developer. And I think if you're a developer in this ecosystem, you have actually great leverage because you know how things work. So today's talk is about MEV, and just curious, who of you know what MEV is here? Okay, so that's cool. So for myself, if you talk about MEV, I did some arbitrages of Dexes and some NFT sniping. So if you haven't been able to mint your NFT, maybe I might be the one to blame. Well, maybe not the only one, but yeah. Anyways, so what is MEV? So it's an abbreviation coming from maximum extractable value. Actually, it used to be called minor extractable value because it's kind of connected with miners and the validators. But the more general term is maximum extractable value. And the way we define this is that, so the way blockchains work is that you have this mempool of transactions that are still not verified. They're still not on the blockchain. These are transactions that people sign and they send it to the network and they just sit there waiting to be included in the blockchain. And then you have the miner or the validator, so depending on whether it's like proof of work or proof of stake, and they take transactions out of this mempool when they build a block and they include it to the blockchain. Now, depending on the transactions they take and the order in which they arrange them, they can get different outcome, financial outcome for them. So they can make money depending on the type of block they build. So if we imagine that they have like a couple of options to build a block, each of these blocks we can put a price, like a reward next to it. That is like the additional reward that the miner can get. And they are incentivized basically to emit the block that gives them the biggest outcome. And because they're in this position where they can arrange things the way they like, then they can extract this value. So this is the maximum extractable value, and we're going to see why this actually is very important for the whole consensus. So if we building a blockchain or a dApp or whatever, we need to have this into account, because otherwise very bad things can happen. So let's see some examples of such kind of extractions that could happen. So one of them is Dex Arbitrage, which is pretty much arbitrage across exchanges. So the idea is very simple. You buy an asset from one exchange and sell it to another at a higher price. So let's say you can buy ETH for $2,000 on Uniswap, and then you can sell it on SushiSwap for $2,010. You make, for 1 ETH, you make like $100 profit. It's pretty much the same as buying on Binance and selling on Kraken, let's say. So buying from one place and selling it to another, you make profit out of the price difference. Now, the nice thing about the Dex Arbitrage in this MEV context that you can actually do this in one transaction. So you don't carry a risk that you buy something and then you can't sell it. So you pretty much, you don't have like this execution risk. Like the only risk that you actually have is that potentially your transaction might fail, in which case you're gonna just pay the gas fees. Now, something that is missing from this picture that is very important is that in order for such kind of arbitrage to open up, to have this difference into prices, usually there is a transaction that happened before that. Somebody made some large swap, he moved the price on one of the exchanges, and now you can actually do this arbitrage. So in this case, you really want to monitor for such kind of large swaps, and then you insert immediately after them. So you need to backrun this large swap, this large exchange that somebody is doing. it's also the case that in this particular arbitrage, and actually for any one of them, you need to compete with everybody else that is willing to do that. You are not the only one monitoring for such kind of opportunities, so everyone is bidding against each other. So you need to be giving the best bid for the gas price. So let's remember just that this is also a background type of arbitrage. We're going to see why that's important later. Another type is the liquidation type of MEV. So the way this works is that in DeFi you have these lending and borrowing protocols. So you put collateral, you take a loan out of them, and then if the price of your collateral drops down, you're going to be liquidated. Like essentially your collateral needs to be sold so that you can, so your loan can be repaid, so that the protocol is not underwater, right? So the way this works is that you have an Oracle update. The Oracle is this thing that brings you information from the outside world, like what is the price of, I don't know, like ETH maybe, like although price of ETH can be read on chain in a sense, but let's say price of ETH. So new price of ETH comes. Let's say it's updated every 5 minutes. So the new update comes in, and at that point your loan is underwater, like not underwater but very close to being underwater. So it needs to be liquidated. So what happens is that somebody sees that, inserts a transaction immediately after the Oracle update, which is basically selling your collateral and repaying the loan and making a profit out of this. So it's around between 5 and 10% profit from the loan size. So it's of $1 million, the liquidator can make like 100K. So it's could be a sizable amount of money. This is again a background type of transaction. So you want to insert a transaction immediately after the Oracle update. So you need to be monitoring for these updates and then make sure that your liquidation goes immediately after that, because otherwise you can be like front run. And let's see the last example, which is actually this is the previous two were examples for good type of MEV. Why good? Because arbitrage gives you the same price across all exchanges, so that's good. Like otherwise, it's going to be a mess. And liquidations are making sure that the protocols are solvent. There is no like loans that are not covered. So these two were good MEV. And this one is a bad MEV, and it's called sandwich attack. So the idea is to sandwich a swap that a user is doing. So the idea is that a user decides to swap some ETH, let's say to buy ETH, and he don't set the parameters of his swap properly. He's not setting the slippage right. So the attacker sees that and manipulates the price of ETH between the execution of his transaction. So he buys ETH before the user buys before the transaction of the user and then sells it. So what's happening is that when you buy the ETH, then the user is going to get worse price. The price of ETH is going to be higher, so he's going to buy into a bigger price, and then when you sell it, you're going to sell it on a bigger price compared to what you bought it. So in this case, you extract value out of the user because he's getting a worse price. So you basically exploit the user that he didn't set his settings properly, and in this case, the money are coming out of a user that just don't know what is going on. So this is also something that's happening a lot, and you need to be careful when you do such kind of swaps to set your slippage right. Now, let's see how this whole MEV thing happened, because initially nobody knew about that. When it was created, when Ethereum and the smart contract system were created, this was not known that this type of extraction could happen. So in 2019, there was a paper from Philip Dayan that analyzed transaction on DEXs, and it uncovered that there are these actors on the decentralized exchange that are doing this weird type of transactions. And this is how MEV was actually discovered, that there are these players doing these arbitrages. So this is when it first appeared as a term. Now, in 2020, the DeFi summer happened, and there is a lot of liquidity that was put into the system. So what this carries is that the more liquidity you have on a blockchain, the bigger the arbitrages you're going to have. So there is more and more money on the table that could be extracted out of it. At the end of 2020, something really strange started to happen. a lot of failed transactions started to appear on the block, on the block space of Ethereum. Maybe 30% of all the transactions on the blockchain were failed transactions. And the reason was actually MEV. And if you remember, these 3 examples that we saw, actually for the sandwich swap, we didn't see that it's a front run plus a back run. So here you need to insert a transaction before and then insert transaction immediately after the victim, let's say. What turned out is that it's very easy to front run transactions on the blockchain by just giving a higher gas fee. So if you submit a transaction for 5 gas, then you can front run that with 6 gas, and then your transaction is going to be inserted before. But there is no easy way to back run transactions. So there is no way to ensure that your transaction is going to appear immediately after somebody else. So what the MEV extractors were doing, they were spamming the network with transactions that are basically doing the same, and they were hoping to win the lottery. So there was this probability that your transaction is going to come immediately after the victim. So they were spamming with as much transactions as they can, and if they don't go after, they just fail. So they write the smart contract in this way. So that's why 30% of all the traffic was pretty much garbage. Now, what this led to is super bad user experience. So in order to submit a transaction and get it included in the blockchain, you have to wait more, you need to pay more. So it was really crap. So at this point, at end of 2020, actually it was kind of an existential crisis for smart contract systems. People were aware of this MEV. There was a huge financial incentive to do it, and now you have a ton of spam happening on the network because of it. So how to fix that? I mean, if you don't fix it, the whole thing is just not going to work. So what happened is that Flashbots came in. So this is a project that we're going to talk a little bit later, and it kind of saved the world, saved crypto. And the Flashbots, we're going to see how it managed to do that. So what is happening right now is that at least 50% of all the blocks contain MEV. So far, over $600 million have been extracted out of this activity. It's about 20 million per day that is made out of this thing. So it's a kind of because 1/3 of this 20 million go to the miners or the validators, it's actually a very important part of the whole incentive, financial incentive of the blockchain. So it's definitely something that needs to be really taken into consideration. So how Flashbots managed to do that? So Flashbots is an open source project. It's not kind of part of the consensus or anything else. It's just it's a fork of Get, the node software that is used to run Ethereum nodes, and it allows you external parties to submit so-called bundles of transactions that miners can include as a one whole. So for example, if you are somebody that wants to do, I don't know, a sandwich attack, you submit to an API the 3 transactions that you want to be included, and you say to the miner, if you include these 3 transactions together, I'm going to give you a tip, like some money. And then it becomes a marketplace. And all the MEV suddenly disappears from the public mempool and is being put into this system. Now, everyone is incentivized who is doing MEV to use the system because he's sure that his bundles are going to be executed in exactly the way he wants to be executed. No more need to spam or anything like this. So this fixed the whole thing. And something that is very important that I'm not sure that a lot of people realize that this type of problem with spam is going to be happening for any blockchain out there, no matter whether it's proof of stake, proof of work, or whatever. So the moment when you have a lot of liquidity, a lot of money being put there, you're going to have this problem with spam. And if you don't have a system like Flashbots that allow you to execute these things properly, then you're going to get a lot of spam. So basically, if you don't have Flashbots, you're going to have spam on your blockchain sooner or later. So a good question is, can MEV be solved, like totally be resolved? And there is basically two hypotheses there. One is maybe there is a way to do a fair ordering, so to have a rules that miners or validators need to obey to order the transaction, so they can't reorder in whatever order they want. And the other school of thought says that there is no way to build such kind of a system. I personally believe that it's mostly like the second, so there is no way to have like a fair system of ordering. Chainlink has a project called Fair Sequencing Service that they're kind of playing with, but you know, the basically idea behind it is that the ordering is like if most nodes see one transaction before the other, then this should be the order. And when you have a distributed system, there is not really a way to have like most nodes. That's not really like quantifiable in a nice way. So far there is no like a system that resolves this problem. So the assumption is that it can't be prevented. And here it's something very important to note. MEV is not specific for blockchains. MEV exists in the real world. For example, Robinhood. Maybe you heard about this app that allows you to do a zero commission stock trading, right? So how Robinhood is making money? Well, they resell the order flow of their users to quantitative trading firms that are front-running these users and extracting value out of them. This is how they make money. So this is, you know, basically MEV in the real world. You take the order flow, you give it to somebody else, like you're in this superior position where, you know, you have this superpower to do that, and then, you know, the value is extracted out of the users. So in each system where you have an actor that has this superior power to reorder things, how they're going to happen, you're going to have MEV. So let's see some exotic MEV, some really interesting concepts out there that are actually, some of them even happen in the wild. So one of them is the Reorg MEV. What does it mean? So in proof-of-work blockchains, the way they work is that miners produce blocks one on top of the other. But the miners are not actually obliged to build on the longest chain. They can decide to build on an older block. So what happens is that you can pay the miners a huge amount of money in order not to build on the tip of the blockchain, but to build on some other older block. And this way, essentially roll back a bunch of transactions that happen. For example, a few years ago, I believe like 2 or 3 years ago, there was a hack on Binance where a lot of money were drained out of the Binance hot wallet. And back then, the CEO of Binance said like, well, we are thinking about giving a bounty of $1 million to the miners in order to revert this transaction, to build on the block before the hack, and don't include the transaction of the hack, and essentially rolling it back so that we can retrieve the money back. So if they lost, let's say, $10 million, they can afford to give like $1 million to the miners to do that. And if the amount of money is big enough, you can actually execute this. It's completely possible. Now, it's a good question whether miners should do that, because in this way they kind of putting their own house on fire. Because, you know, if they start to do such kind of deals, then the user experience of blockchain is going to be really, really poor. Like you're not really sure for a very long time whether your transaction will be final, because miners can decide to do such kind of a reorg. And one very interesting example in DeFi is how you can exploit this with lending and borrowing. So imagine that you have a loan for $10 million on Aave, and it's going to be liquidated on the next Oracle update. So it's a very like on the edge of being liquidated. Now, just before the Oracle update, the owner of the loan comes in and repays it. So now it's safe. And then the Oracle update happens, and everything is good. So no liquidation. Now, but an MEV extractor, what he can do is that he sees this 10 million loan, he knows that he can make like $1 million out of it if he liquidates it, so 10% fee. And he just says, well, I'm going to pay $500,000 if you do a reorg on top of before the repayment, remove the repayment so that I can liquidate this guy. And that's completely possible. It's basically a matter of money. So that was proposed by Edgar Araut. He's a MEV extractor, like kind of a famous one. And it caused a lot of debate on crypto Twitter, whether it should be done or not. The debate was so strong that eventually even Vitalik waded in, and he was like, if we really do that, like it's a matter of somebody just write an open source project to do it. Like it's literally that. The user experience will be terrible. So that could be, again, an existential threat for blockchain. So we shouldn't just do it, which is kind of a, I don't know. I mean, but the good thing is that proof of stake is kind of fixing that. So that's not an existential threat anymore. Now, the other type of exotic MEV, let's say, is layer 2 MEV. So with layer 2 systems, the way they work is that they accept transactions, they encode it into this bundle that is being generated, and then it's posted on layer 1. So there is a sequencer. So you don't have a miner or validator. You have this special sequencer role that is accepting the transactions and building the bundles and posting them on-chain. Now, it's possible, let's say you have two layer 2s, Arbitrum and Optimism, and you have decentralized exchanges on both of them. Now, you can do arbitrage between two of them. The same example we saw before, like Ether is $2,000 on Arbitrum, 2010 on Optimism. Now, you can do arbitrage to buy on one and sell on the other. But because these are on two different blockchains, so to say, so two different L2s, you can't really do this atomically. It's possible that you buy on one, and by the time you sell on the other, the price moved, and now you're going to lose money. So you have this incentive to control both of the sequencers. Right now, sequencers are run by the teams of these projects. They're not really decentralized on any way or whatever. But the moment these sequencers start to be operated by random parties, there is a very strong financial incentive for them to collude together and execute such kind of arbitrages atomically. So if I control the sequencer on Arbitrum and Optimism, now I can run this arbitrage without any risk. I know that nobody can plug in between and spoil my arbitrage. So ultimately, the MEV is going to lead to centralization. And we need to be really careful with that. This is something that is kind of about to develop, so we need to keep an eye on how it's going to unfold. One kind of a side effect of this is that confirmation times are probably going to become a bit longer. Right now on Arbitrum and Optimism, when you submit a transaction, it's like super magical. Like your transaction is immediately confirmed, which is not the case with proof of work or proof of stake blockchains. So the delay is going to be happening because once the sequencers become MEV extractors, they're going to wait a little bit before they include your transaction to see like, okay, maybe I can extract some money out of this, or yeah, like the same way like proof of stake. There is some research on doing fair sequencing, but still I don't think there is any solution for that. So the idea is to, again, somehow make the sequencers not do reordering in any way they want. And the final one, so this one is pretty much the same as the other. The other one that I want to talk about is about ETH2. So the merge happened like 3 days ago. And what is happening after the merge? Now nothing major is changing, I would say. Like MEV is still there, but there are two bad things that are kind of unfolding, and you need to be aware of this, especially if you're a smart contract developer. Now, one of them is the so-called Tiwap Oracle attack. So with proof of stake, in the Ethereum case, the validators are known upfront. So you know for the future blocks, let's say for, I don't know, maybe 10 blocks in the future, who is going to be the validator for this? Now, if you control a lot of the validators in the system, like Lido, let's say, then it's a very high chance that you get 2 blocks in a row that you're going to be validating. And now what you can do is you can run MEV at 2 blocks one after the other, which was not really possible before that. Now, what is this allowing you to do? Now, there is certain DeFi protocols that rely on these Tiwap oracles, which is basically a time-weighted oracle that is calculating the price of an asset over some period of time. So what you can do, like these Tiwaps, they're updated at the end of each block. So the block finishes, Tiwap is updated of the new value. So if you have control of 2 consecutive blocks, what's happening is that on the first block, you can manipulate the Tiwap. You can execute a huge trade and move the price of ETH, I don't know, 10 times. And then the Tiwap is going to be higher. And then on the next block, because you control the next block, you make sure that nobody is backrunning you after that. There is nobody that is taking advantage of your manipulation. So if you pump the price, you know that nobody is going to come in and start selling against you. But because the Tiwap is manipulated, now you can start liquidating loans or maybe take a huge loan, which is going to be liquidated after the end of the block. So you can do such kind of shenanigans, which essentially lead to making the lending on borrowing protocols insolvent. So the way to fix that is basically to ensure that the Tiwap period is long enough so that such kind of manipulation is not really possible. But it's an attack that I believe in the next couple of months, maybe we're going to see some exploits around this. So protocols that are using Tiwaps need to be really, really careful now. The other one is the randomness attack. If you use some kind of a randomness in your smart contract, because now the validators can control 2 consecutive blocks, it's possible that you manipulate the randomness in a way that if you use randomness to calculate some kind of an outcome, and the randomness changes for the 2 blocks, now you can decide on which block you want to execute the transaction, which is kind of favorable for you. So in this way, you are increasing your chances of winning the randomness game. Now, the good thing with Ethereum 2 is that there is no more reorg MEV. So you can't really execute this type of, how we said, existential type of problematic MEV. So at least we have one good thing. And finally, I'm going to close with this change that is happening on ETH that is also kind of important. It's called the proposer-builder separation, which is actually running right now. You can look it up on GitHub. It's called MEV Boost. The idea is that we want to remove the MEV from the validators in a way that they shouldn't decide about MEV for themselves. So what is happening right now, the proposer is basically the builder or the miner in the blockchain. And the proposer is the miner or the validator on the blockchain, and the builder is the one that is proposing the blocks. So this is an external party that is constructing the block and is saying to the validator, include this block, and this is going to be the maximum reward you're going to get out of it. Now, the problem with this separation became kind of very obvious with the Tornado Cash sanctions of OFAC, where if you're operating a builder or validator in the US and you're building blocks with Tornado Cash transactions, basically you can go to prison because you're violating the sanctions. So there should be a way to make this system, proposer-builder separation, censorship resistant. And the way currently is being thought about fixing this problem is that the validator can be sending the builder a list of transactions he wants to be included for sure. Like he says that, give me a block, but I want these transactions to be there for sure. This is still not really implemented, so we're going to see how that develops. But yeah, that was everything for me. So yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions, if not, we can talk on the hallway also. There's a question over there. One question. Okay.
Yeah. Hi. Maybe I didn't catch if you said anything about sharding that's coming to Ethereum. Is this going to affect in any way this whole story, or is going to maybe, or it won't make any difference?
It won't make any difference. It will be mostly like, I think most of the MEV will be in one shard. Now cross-shard MEV, that's, I'm not sure that's going to work because it's going to be like an async type of communication. So when it's async, then you don't have this atomicity. So you have this risk that your MEV is not going to run properly. And in that case, it won't be viable. So I guess the MEV will be mostly into single shard.
Okay. And maybe quickly, like, do you see any like zero knowledge type of stuff like privacy kind of helping? I mean, it's obviously not yet very implemented, like on layer 2s, layer 3s, whatever. But could this maybe help one day?
There is some research in the space of making the mempool private. So you submit transactions and they kind of encrypt it so that searchers, MEV searchers can't see what is in there. In that case, maybe some of this MEV could be removed. But keep in mind that the type of MEV, for example, around liquidations, I mean, you can't really, it's actually something that is needed to have the DeFi system working. So this type of good MEV, it's going to be still there. The way maybe things could improve is around the sandwiching type of attacks where users are getting exploited. But this is something that is still like in research and it's not implemented.
Yeah, true. Thank you. Thank you very much.